when you look at what's going on in Europe and to a certain extent in America, there was that recent thing in New Jersey that they're trying to implement Sharia law on a particular magistrate, but you look at it in particular, Europe and the place where these, the historical relevance of these men that fought back against the tyranny of jihad, what is taking place for these young men over there? What is a way that they can reintegrate themselves as a predominant voice in their cultures in order to combat what seems to be a growing temperature of radicalization?
Yeah, they unfortunately have a long and hard road against them because they've gone so far back with what they've done. And again, the best way to understand it is compare and contrast their behavior with their ancestors, who I describe in, let's say defenders of the West. And I talk about European heroes who were the exact opposite. These were the men that we were alluding to earlier, the heroes who actually gave everything they had. And they didn't have to. A lot of these men were kings and emperors who actually left everything just to go and fight and defend the cause of Christendom. And, it's what's interesting to me, and I've said this before, is whereas Muslims are walking in perfect continuity with their ancestors, they still have the same mentality because it's part and parcel of Islamic teaching, which is hostility for the non-Muslim, the infidel, the kafir, and, the imperative to conquer and subjugate, etc. And you see this from Muslims, both in the Muslim world, but even more so in Europe, because wherever you go and you have large pockets of Muslims, think Sweden, think England, Germany, France, you have problems, serious problems. Okay. But then the West, we were talking about the defenders of the West, the Christians, their modern descendants are actually walking in perfect discontinuity with their ancestors. So instead of fighting tooth and nail and resisting them, they're going out of their way to bring them in. And I always say this, and it's so mind-boggling when you think of it this way, but unfortunately too many Western people, white people, if you will, they think of themselves as sort of, because they look at Western nations and they see that they're still the majority, and they think somehow, they owe it to everyone else. But in reality, if you look at the world population, the white population is something like 4% of the whole world. And I just find it amazing that 4% is the one that is being obligated to open its doors to everyone, to abnegate and disavow its heritage and its religion and its culture and its civilization, to suppress itself. It's just amazing. I've never seen such a self-suicidal impetus. And then you compare it to the earlier, with the ones we're talking about, the heroes, their forefathers. Little wonder they hate them and they don't want to talk about them, the Crusaders, and they want to suppress them because they're doing the exact opposite. Whereas the first guys, the heroes, were fighting for the cause of Christendom and Christianity, fighting for their cultures and their civilization. These Europeans, at least their leaders, are doing everything possible to destroy their people. I mean, when you look at, when I hear stories coming out of England, the attack on free speech, that you can't even say the truth and you're going to get, it's just, I don't get how the English people don't realize they've become slaves. Okay. And it doesn't matter if they think those people are elected officials or not. It's one big charade at this point when they're doing what they're doing. And it's so obvious.
Wow.
I saw, and I put in one of my books, I have a quote from some sort of parliamentarian in Germany, I think in Munich, Stephanie something. And basically she gets up and says, oh, I have news for all you right wingers who are complaining that, this city or Germany in general is going to be Muslim majority in whatever years. And that's what actually some Pew results, Pew polls say, that like 2050 Muslims might be like 50%. And she goes, and that's a good thing. I mean, think about that mentality. And I just told you, you're 4% of the world population and you're boasting because that 4% in its own homeland is giving up its homeland even more. It's really a sick, almost diabolical mentality. And it's become so pervasive that people don't notice it. It's, I always talk about the boiling frog syndrome. If you're in that, then you're just boiling and boiling and boiling. You don't even get it anymore. But this is, if you can step out of reality for a moment, if people could look at what's happening in the West and what the West is doing to itself, it's just mind boggling. It's utterly unprecedented. And, but as far as your question, what man you can do, this is why I say it's so hard, because everything is set against them. Everything. from the way the models of Christianity are being demonized constantly, to the fact that you can't even open your mouth without possibly getting in trouble with the law. It's the system's not going to work for them. Okay, the bottom line is, doing it the normal way at the voting poll or the voting booth, it's not going to work, because the whole thing is at this point rigged. But at the same time, I was telling you, why do they actually try to emasculate men and Christians? There's a reason that they want to, here in the West, they want to convince every boy that he's a little girl. And it's not just perversion, which it is, but it's also, if you want to rule and govern and dominate a place, you want to do it. You want to rule and govern a country run by women. And if I turn every man and make him think he's a woman, essentially, and he's just given up on, he doesn't ever resist, I'm going to rule and control that country. So that's, I think, been going on for decades. And that's why Western men have been so emasculated. And so even at this point, I don't think they could, get up and do what they have to do, which is whatever is necessary, because of generations of them being so utterly emasculated from every corner, one from kindergarten, from the media, from the church that they go to. It's become a very difficult thing. And, it's not very hopeful, but such is the situation. And it might have to get worse before it gets better.